How do I do a funny cold open about making a mausoleum? Maybe just dead air? Hi, I'm Dave. This is Dave's Weird Project, and today I'm showing you how I made a mausoleum piece. This is for Frostgrave. It's called for in one of the scenarios in the core rules, but you can use it in just about any setting. Let's take a look. The scenario in Frostgrave calls for a mausoleum that is squarish or square, 6 inches on a side, and has a door in the center of each side. It states that the doors aren't required to be modeled on it, but what am I, a chump? Of course I'm going to model them. I researched some different mausoleum pictures for reference and ideas, and then started sketching out kind of what I wanted it to look like. I thought some columns would be cool, give it a sort of ornate look, and not just a flat roof, but a peak. I've never really worked with angles before on building and making a building, so I wanted to try that out. I didn't want a full pyramid on top, so something else was going to have to go up there to finish it off. I started making the base with the black foam core. This is the slightly more expensive stuff that I get at Bimart. The paper doesn't come off as easily, but that's okay for this. I don't want it to. I want that smoother finish from the paper. So this is going to be the floor, and the columns will get glued on it, and then the walls will come up from the centered square. To save some hassle later, I marked out where the pillars were going to go and where the doors were on each side. Before I know how tall the walls for the mausoleum are supposed to be, I need to figure out how tall the pillars are going to be, because they're kind of the limiting factor on the height. I'm using bottle caps from sparkling water that I like. So to make the pillars, I'm going to take little bits of foam, hot glue them inside each cap, and then hot glue that down onto the next cap below. That gives hopefully enough surface for them to stick together and stay in one piece. I enlist the services of Corporal McScale to come in and check if the pillars seem high enough to be taller than a person, but still not, crazy tall. I needed to duplicate the shape of the base as another base for the roof structure. So I traced that onto some single corrugated cardboard and cut it out. And hey, we're starting to have an actual structure, or something that might be a structure. To cover up the exposed corrugation on the edges of the cardboard, I use a technique from Wyloch's Armory called corrugation cladding, where you just take some heavy paper and you cut it into strips whose width is the same as the thickness of your cardboard, and then you glue that on all around the edge. Alright, so the base of the roof is prepped. Now I need to start working out how to build the walls around the main structure. I measured the height of the pillars, and they were all very close to 2 inches, if not exactly 2 inches. So I cut thin strips of the Dollar Tree foam board to 2 inches wide. I used the Dollar Tree because I thought I was going to tear the paper off and texture the walls. As the project went on, I ended up deciding to do something a little different, and I'm glad I did. After the walls were glued down with hot glue, I took some cereal box cardboard and started cutting these rectangles. I measured them out so that there would be 3 rows per wall and roughly 6.5 panels per row. The idea was to make it look like, almost like bricks, but very big bricks, like this was made out of large slabs of stone, not just small bricks. I didn't want to glue them on, though, until I made the doors that go on the sides, because I wanted the doors to be inset in the bricks, so I would have to cut some in order to make the space. So the next part of the process is making the doors. I drew a couple different designs out on some chipboard, and then I thought I might save myself some time by carving in the details with my Dremel tool. Unfortunately, this didn't go super well. The tool just kind of kicked up a lot of paper and made it kind of a fuzzy mess. I also wanted to engrave the floors in front of the doors with some Roman numerals, and it did the same thing there. So I fell back on a more tried and true technique, scoring the lines of the details with the X-Acto knife, and then I used a punch from a set of punches and chisels that I have to deepen those grooves just by dragging it along. It took a little longer for sure, but it produced good results. I wanted to embellish the doors some more, so I made frames that would go on top, be layered on top, and produce some three-dimensionality. basically out of the same chipboard. When I was making the designs, I left this gutter around the actual doors to leave space for that. And then I just cut the frames out of some more chipboard, basically just big rectangular U-shapes. I used hot glue to secure the doors to the walls, and then I decided to try out tacky glue. I've been hearing a lot about it from a couple different channels like Tabletop Engineer and Wyloch, and I love this stuff. It is amazing. So I used it to start sticking on the slab pieces that were going to make up that kind of outer wall texture, and I ended up using it pretty much for the rest of the project. And here we are many gluings later with all of the slabs stuck on. Before moving on to working on the roof, I decided I wanted to make the roof something that could lift off, and I might eventually make some spaces inside to like store minis and dice and things. So I made this little square skirt out of foam board that would fit just perfectly, or close to perfectly, inside the base structure. I lost a lot of footage apparently about gluing this on. This is all I've got about measuring it. But it's pretty straightforward. It's just 4 thin strips of foam board, about a ½ inch thick, glued into a square shape underneath the roof, and they kind of fit snugly inside the walls of the base. Okay, time for some roofing. First I made the central pyramid structure that went up from the center square. I cut these 45-degree right triangles out of double corrugated cardboard to be supports for the pyramid sides. Once those were dry, I glued the pyramid sides down as well. I did a bunch of math and trigonometry to figure out the angles to cut for the pyramid sides, and I'm not sure where that footage went either. I'm kind of bad at this. But anyway, it worked out pretty close. If you have an interest in knowing exactly what the math was that I did, leave me a comment and maybe I'll make another video about it. The next part of the roof are the 4 vertical faces that go at the end of each side, above the door and the pillars. I just used the ends of the roof itself to mark out exactly where I needed, and then started cutting those out. The angle on these pieces is just a simple 45 degrees. I got some scrap pieces of the black foam core and cut out little rectangles to basically act as supports. I'd glue these on the inside of each vertical face, and it would help support it against the roof and against the sides and the top leaning on it. This may be overkill. I've seen other channels like Wyloch basically gluing the chipboard directly onto other chipboard just right on the edge with no support, and it makes me nervous, so that's why I do this. With all 4 of the vertical faces glued on, I measure out on a scrap of chipboard the distances from the top of the vertical face to the pyramid and the bottom of the vertical face to the pyramid. I use this template to create the pieces that will go at the sides of each vertical face. The last part with the chipboard is just closing up the tops of each of those sections with just a simple rectangle. Here's the roof and some pillars and the base kind of dry fitted together just to see if it's coming together the way I want, and so far I'm pretty pleased. And then I had to start figuring out what to do for the very top. I kind of wanted something that would rise to a sort of dome, but not like a perfect dome. I don't really know how to describe it. But I got this foam mat stuff that we had around, kind of kids play mat kind of material. I don't know what kind of foam this is, but it cuts really well. It's actually pretty easy to work with and carve. I glued 2 square slabs together at the size of the top, slightly bigger than the top actually, so it would overhang. And then I just kind of started going to town on the top of it with the utility knife and just trying to carve this dome shape. I cut a recess into the underside and tried to bevel the edges so that it would fit down on top of the pyramid smoothly and there'd be very little gap. Quick safety note, this material is very soft. If you find yourself pushing with your blade is probably too dull and you want to trade it out for a sharp one. It should take very little force to cut through this, and you can go very slowly and carefully. After gluing the dome on, I covered basically the entire roof structure in drywall joint compound. I used this back in my city tiles project to do texturing on the road surface. Here I'm going for an effect of one smooth application of stucco or other plaster to the roof. I don't have footage of this application because it was very messy and chaotic, and I didn't want to try to wrangle my phone at the same time. And it started to smell like fish. I took it outside to sand it because I didn't want to get plaster dust all over my table or my carpet. So I just took a sheet of, I think, 150 grit outside. I was trying to smooth off all the rough edges and everything from applying the joint compound. Trying to make it smooth, but not super smooth, if that makes any sense. I still wanted a little bit of a rough pattern here and there, like it was worked by hand, it was put on by people. I probably could have done more ultimately, but it turned out okay. There's a lot of exposed foam on the base, so I coated it in Blackmagic Craft's Blackmagic base coat. There'll be a link to that so you can see how he makes that, and it's great stuff. I coated the whole thing thinking I was probably going to work this up as a dark gray to very white highlights, but then I got an idea to maybe do something a little different with the paint scheme, try something in a more earthy tone. So I picked up a Krylon in this sand dollar color and hit everything with that, the top, the bottom, the pillars, gave it all a couple thin coats so that it was all nice and opaque. I wanted to keep the overall paint scheme pretty simple, so I started with a mix of real brown, they were out of fake brown, and some medium gray and a little bit of the matte medium. And I painted that on the sort of doorway, doorstep areas, and the vertical faces on the roof. I also used this color on the outer frame of the doors, that kind of raised frame. It took 2 coats on all these surfaces to get it opaque enough. I wanted the doors to look like old weathered metal, so I mixed some black with the nickel metallic color I have in the craft paints and put that on each of the doors. And really only 1 coat for this one. It was dark enough, and I kind of wanted some fade showing through, the fade to that tan color, to make it look older. Next up, I got my black wash out and started working with that, and this proved to be a bit challenging because it kept beating up on the surface of basically anywhere that the Krylon was still exposed. I just kept working it back and forth, and it eventually settled in and went into the cracks and smoothed out and didn't look so beady. Did some dry brushing next with medium gray in a downward motion to try to catch the upward edges of the slabs and the door frames and everything else. And also went around the roof with it, caught all the corners and edges to try to make those look a little bit more weathered than the central parts of the various panels. I decided I wasn't too happy with the shadows in the Roman numeral carvings and the grout areas between the slabs. So I came in with some black and a fine brush and just kind of fleshed those out a little more, added a little more shade to them, trying to make it look a little more robust. The pillars got basically the same treatment as the walls. I just covered them in wash directly over the Krylon base coat, and then used medium gray in a dry brushing side-to-side motion to catch the ridges on the bottle caps. And that's basically it. Glued all the pillars on. I didn't glue the top on because, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to be able to take that off and possibly store things inside it like miniatures. So yeah, this is the finished product. Mausoleum, ready for the Frostgrave scenario that called for it. I kind of hate it. Okay, so maybe I don't hate it, but I'm not super thrilled with it. Something's just not right. I don't know if it's the color or maybe there's just a lack of extra detail. There were some other things I kind of wanted to try and I ended up not doing because I was actually kind of crunched for time on this one. I'm barely getting this one in on schedule. But anyway, we'll talk about lessons learned in just a sec. First, all that usual stuff. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share, do all that. If you want to support the channel, you can check out some links down below that Terry will make sure get in there. And yeah, so let's move on to the lessons learned. I do these projects as much to learn something as to make something, so I like to round up what I've learned at the end. On the crafting side, I tried a lot of new techniques out on this one. Complex cardboard construction with non-right angles, engravings, tacky glue, carving foam, using filler to make a whole shell around the thing, and some new spray paints, So there was a lot going on. There was a lot to try, a lot of mistakes I could make, and I feel like I did okay. The tacky glue is amazing. I love it. Carving foam, carving that kind of spongy playmat foam is it's interesting. I think it's definitely something I need to practice more, but I feel like it could be really good with some practice. Those new sprays I'm not super happy with. I feel like the paint beat it up on them. The thin paint, the wash. And in the next video where I paint some minis and I sprayed them with a similar stuff to base coat them, we're going to see the same thing. So I'm not super happy with those. The engravings I thought worked out really well. Could have been better, but obviously that just needs some practice. And yeah, the carving, constructing from the cardboard with the different angles and things, that actually went a lot better than I thought it would. I worried that I would get everything like off by 1 degree and so nothing would fit, and I feel like it all kind of fit together pretty well. So yeah, some good lessons. Yeah, on the video side, not a lot. I feel like I'm really hitting my stride with this. I still haven't done anything with the audio equalizing, but it's not that bad. Like, yeah, sometimes one bit is a little bit louder than the other when I'm narrating, but oh well. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty comfortable with how I'm making these, so unless a crazy new thing happens with the video process, I'm probably not going to do video lessons learned for a while. So that about does it for this mausoleum. The next part of the Frostgrave project, some skeletons to go with it, is going to be either next week or the week after. It depends on how editing goes. I've got another video almost ready that if I can get that done, I may just put that first. But anyway, whatever. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've got any suggestions for how to make this one better, or maybe how to do it a second time and punch it up. I'd love to hear that. And yeah, until next time, take care, everybody. So unless a crazy new thing happens with the video process, I'm probably not going to do video lessons learned for a while. Whoops. It's going to be painting some skeletons to go with the mausoleum. So that'll be fun. I just said, so that'll be fun, like your teacher.